Welcome to K. Elizabeth Toasts, a podcast celebrating people who increase our quality of life. I'm your host, K. Elizabeth, a licensed counselor, coach, and PhD who is interested in what people do to make others' lives better through the lens of the 5 social determinants of health. The World Health Organization says these 5 social determinants can impact up to 55% of our health outcomes. In this episode, our guest shares how they impact the social determinant of economic stability. Give a listen if you need a dopamine hit, or if you like toast, because this toasts for you.
My name is Richard Probst, and I am the founder of the Tenderness Tour. I'm a paraplegic double amputee with spina bifida. I work in leadership for a government agency serving people with disabilities. I really am living my good life. And so much of it started with the tour.
What is the Tenderness Tour?
The Tenderness Tour is an event that I started in 1989. So yes, almost 35 years ago. The very first one was a 41-day, 1,000-plus mile wheelchair ride around Indiana.
Whoa!
I went around the border of Indiana, and I zigzagged it a couple of times. And I traveled in my wheelchair with $20 in my pocket, a backpack on my wheelchair, and I was alone.
Wow.
It was early on, I did a lot with Prevent Child Abuse Indiana because I'd had a pretty rough childhood. And by the time I reached that first Tenderness Tour, I was really out there looking for tenderness. I mean, the name was very intentional. I wanted to figure out if there were good people in the world, and I wanted to figure out if there was a reason for me to keep on living. And so I came up with this idea to wheel around the state of Indiana talking about my story and just looking for good people. And honestly, I didn't think I would find them. That first tour, I was convinced I would come back and it would affirm that, my life perception was correct, that people were horrible, that there was no reason for me to be around. But in reality, I found just the opposite.
How do you go from, I want to figure out a reason to live and see if there's good people in the world, to I'm going to go on a 41-day tour? That feels like a big jump.
Yeah, it was a big jump, and I wish I had a logical reason for that big jump. I was not an athlete. I was not someone who, I had done the 500 Festival Mini Marathon. I had done the mini marathon on crutches. It's a half marathon.
Wait, you did a half marathon on crutches?
Yep.
I don't think that you can say that you are not an athlete.
I heard that a lot on this tour this year, too. People arguing with me about whether or not I'm an athlete. But to this day, I have the slowest time ever recorded for the mini marathon. It was the very next year that they came up with a time limit, because I took like 7.5 hours, but I finished.
Amazing.
And I'm not honestly really sure why I came up with the idea of wheeling around, other than the fact that I needed something really extreme, and I'll kind of give you a foundation for that. It's kind of a dramatic foundation, but not long before the tour, that first tour, I had lost my wife to suicide, my daughter along with her, my newborn daughter along with her, literally my legs below the knees, and I had been living in my car. I mean, I lost everything financially. I had attempted suicide really dramatically. I had doused myself and my car in gasoline, and I had lit it. And literally nothing happened. Not a spark, not a flame, nothing. To this day, I have no explanation for why that happened. But I knew in my mind that I was a drama writer, by the way, in case that's not obvious. My mind has always thought dramatically. When I started thinking about needing to do something, I thought dramatically. I thought, I have to absolutely know there's a reason I'm here. I have to do something that everybody is telling me is impossible. It's been 35 years. I barely remember yesterday, but I don't remember why I came up with that idea other than number one, I love Indiana. I've always loved Indiana. Um, and I just kept thinking, let's do something impossible. Let's really challenge. I am a person of faith. So for me, it was, challenging God. If there's a reason I'm here, show me that reason. I want to see it. It better be cut and dry. I cannot have any doubt. Don't challenge God. That's just stupid. So, I could be in the middle of farmland, rural Indiana, and people would show up and they would offer help. I was horrible as a fundraiser at that point. I'm still not great, but I was horrible as a fundraiser, but I was really good at getting attention. I learned, when a guy in a wheelchair is wheeling up your highway into your town, whether it's raining, snowing, whatever, people pay attention. I'm not fast. I average about 2 to 3 miles an hour. And so I found that I was getting opportunities to tell my story. Maybe even more importantly, I was getting opportunities to listen to stories. I was encountering person after person after person who had a story to tell and who could identify, in fact, with a lot of my trauma. And I began to realize, number one, I'm not alone, and that there was some sort of mission in this Tenderness Tour. I don't think I ever envisioned it as this 35-year journey that I would go on, but I began to realize that I had something to offer. And I came back from that tour realizing I needed to get my act together. I got in stable housing. I went back to college, found my first strong male role model in Father Harden, found a gift for counseling, which is where I started off my work, worked in crisis intervention. As my life kept getting better, as I started living my good life, as I went off disability and went to work, the tour stayed part of my life. Since 1989, I've traveled over 6,000 miles by wheelchair. I've raised probably over $1 million for a variety of organizations. This year's tour is by far my most successful because I'm at about 82,000 right now. Usually I'm in the $10,000, $20,000 range per tour. And this year's event has really resonated with people. I've worked with different causes. I started out child abuse prevention, and then I went into domestic violence, and then I went into wellness type issues, and I went into sexual violence. And, and of course, this year I started doing things with medical debt.
35 years, first of all, that is a very long time. Second of all, how do you choose what organizations that you support?
Sometimes it is just a personal preference. It's an organization I meet or I encounter, or it's where I'm at in my own healing journey. Prevent Child Abuse Indiana was about processing my own childhood issues. Domestic violence came out because a loved one experienced domestic violence, and I didn't know how to cope with that. I had worked so hard on violence prevention that I was struggling to deal with that. And so I thought, let's do a tour. And so I contacted, the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and they were open to a tour. I had a friend who worked there who had, at one time, owned a bookstore, and she had carried my book. And so I trusted her. And so, those kind of human connections, we sometimes forget how much just an incidental encounter can change a life. And so anyway, I worked with the Indiana Coalition and did a tour, and then they ended up loving the event. And in fact, my event turned into their annual 5K event, which is the raceway from domestic violence. And it's in its 21st year.
Wow.
And so, which is really cool. I've had occasional invitations to do a tour. I did a tour in Southern Illinois about 10 years ago, I think. And that was an invitation from someone who had volunteered for the tour one time, but we were social media friends, and she had a tragedy happen in her life. Her daughter was out camping with a boyfriend, and they encountered someone in rural Southern Illinois, and they were both killed. by this person. And so she wanted me to come down, do a tour in her hometown, start a scholarship in her daughter's name. And so I did. And basically what we did was we ended up uh, going to the area where she had been killed, and I wheeled her home. That was an event that the entire town just really wrapped around.
When you say wheeled her home, what do you mean?
It's very symbolic. It was I wheeled from the place where she had been killed to her home
Oh, wow.
because she never returned home. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, it was actually one of my shortest tours because it was like 17 miles. But I went down for a weekend. We did the tour. I was her mom's a nurse and worked in a nursing facility. That nursing facility kept me overnight. It became really meaningful. And so sometimes it's a small event like that. Sometimes it's uh, a bigger event, a nonprofit that I meet that I like. A friend who had joined a brand new youth center in Elwood. The woman who was starting it had tragically lost her husband in a car accident. She was following through on their dream of starting a youth center in Elwood. And so I thought, okay, let's go do something. Again, that was like a weekend tour, not a big, long, dramatic tour, but it was a weekend tour. And we raised, enough to pay their rent for the first couple of years. What I've always liked about the tour is that, you get the really macro events, the big events that, make a huge difference. I'm kind of a micro activist. I really look for the organizations where if you give $10,000, it changes the life of the organization. I really like that. What I really think is special about the tour is the fact that, I do wheel at 2 to 3 miles an hour. And I do, what I tell people is I'm in a wheelchair. I move at 2 to 3 miles an hour. I'm not going to avoid you if you come up to me. I can't, I can't rush off the trail. I can't go upstairs. I'm going to have to talk to you. And I love that. When I travel, I tend to do a tour wherever I go just because I'm quirky that way. If I go to Austin, Texas, I'll do a 1 day tour there. Uh, I did a conference in the Phoenix area. So I did like Phoenix, Mesa, Glendale, because they're all right there. I thought, well, that's a good way to just do Arizona. I got an award once, the Donna J. Stone Award, which is Prevent Child Abuse America's highest award. Really cool. They invited me to their national conference in Orlando. So, of course, I had to do a tour in Orlando. Um, so, I do a lot of stuff like that. And, I technically retired after my 30th anniversary, but, I've also retired at 10, 20, 30. So I'm never going to retire. I'd be perfectly happy if something tragic happened and I die on tour. That would be me dying doing something I absolutely love.
Talk me through your most recent tour.
I had been homeless twice because of medical debt. And I had watched my parents struggle with, bills and with my expenses as a child. December of 2022, I was diagnosed with bladder cancer. Because I'm an overachiever, they end up finding that I also have prostate cancer. So, I had really got back in touch with the idea of medical debt and the fear of losing everything. But I also got in touch with the fact that I had insurance. Yes, I spent thousands of dollars out of pocket, but I had a maximum out of pocket and I knew that. And so for the first time, I wasn't worried about losing everything. And I thought to myself, I really wanted people to have that same experience. At the same time, had a producer approach me. I am involved with the Heartland International Film Festival. They present a social impact award in my name. The person had heard me presenting the award and ended up going out, buying the book that I've written called The Hallelujah Life. They approached me and said, would you be willing to do a short documentary about the tour. We need an event that we can do just to catch some film. And I started planning it. I picked the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, the Monon Trail, the Nickel Plate Trail, the Elkhart's Pumpkin Vine Nature Trail, which is my favorite trail in Indiana, and the Cardinal Greenway. And so I started mapping this route, and I came up with the idea. I started thinking about medical debt, but it didn't make sense to me to raise, let's raise $10,000, because that might pay off one person's bill. And now that might be amazing, but that just didn't seem effective and efficient. I came across Undo Medical Debt, which is a national nonprofit started by collection industry executives who got tired of being collection industry executives. And so they took that same model of going out, buying debt in bulk, but instead of collecting it, they now forgive it based on donations.
That's incredible.
On average, for every dollar donated, around $100 of medical debt is eliminated, because they buy it for pennies on the dollar in bulk. And so my $82,000, if you do the math, will eliminate around $8.2 million in medical debt for Hoosiers, which is, when you think about it, me going on the road for 7-8 days, $1 million a day for wheeling. If I know that I can have a direct impact on someone's life, I'm going to at least do everything in my power to try to do that. I may fail. I may look like a fool for trying, some people are like, okay, well, you raised 82,000 and your goal was $1 million. So you've raised about 8% of your goal. Number one, I'm not going to quit till I get to $1 million, and eventually I will. But if you go with that line of thinking, it paralyzes you when you don't do anything, and doing nothing is not acceptable.
I know that you're done with your most recent Tenderness Tour, but are you still collecting donations?
I'm kind of committing this to a longer term and to continued wheeling. And I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do next in terms of wheeling. But I definitely want to sustain the energy from this tour, which has been a lot of fun. People can always visit tendernesstour.com. I'm all over social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn. I just encourage anybody who wants to get involved, who wants to find out more, reach out. I'm trying to build a village of compassionate Hoosiers to prove that one person can make a difference, and that, we belong to one another. And I'd love to have people join me.
Is there anyone in your life that's impacted you positively that you'd like to recognize?
I've always had at least one person in my life who has been profoundly inspiring, motivating, supportive. Certainly Father Hardin at Martin University was a profoundly healthy role model for me. Here's this guy who, this Franciscan priest who was kind of a rabble rouser, who, basically was given the school by the archdiocese so he would stop doing so much with social justice. And just a really amazing human being who I love dearly. And just, he committed to finding out how I learned, and he did it and changed the course of my life. Certain friends have had this, I have a friend, Valerie, who has been a friend since 3rd grade. So she has seen virtually every narrative arc of my life and has stuck around through them all. There was a point right after the cancer surgery where I bottomed out and it wasn't looking great. And I ended up in intensive care. And the minute she knew that things were going south, she was here from Seattle and actually ended up staying a month. And I gave her grief the whole time. I was I was probably a sucky friend, but I mean, to say, the impact of that on my life and my healing is profound. So many people that I've worked with in terms of fundraising, my Tenderness Tour volunteers, I mean, my road crews are always, it's kind of a sacred experience to most people who do it. It's not the most fun. It's not the most engaging experience, but it's profoundly connecting and vulnerable, and people love it. And I mean, my life has changed because of the crews that I've had. I've had probably close to 100 surgeries in my life, and it's the nurses who raised me. It's the nurses who taught me how to love, how to be independent. I mean, they fought for me, and they've pushed me, they've nurtured me, they've picked me up when I've fallen, they've allowed me to fail, but they've also challenged me to succeed. They have done amazing miracles in my life and given me a quality of life nobody ever imagined.
Well, cheers to Father Hardin, Valerie, to your Tenderness Tour roadies, and to nurses. Cheers to them. Richard, for being dramatic, for stepping out and putting yourself on the line, for using yourself as an example, and for working on your own trauma and your own healing so that you could support others in their own healing as well. For impacting one person at a time, for going slow at 2 to 3 miles per hour so that you can interact with other people and enjoy the world in which you're in, for fighting for your life, and for fighting for everyone else's life in the process. You fought for everyone, including yourself. And for that, this toast is for you. Cheers, Richard.
Well, thank you.
Now it's your turn. Honor someone who has made your life better by recommending them as a guest or by recording a toast to them at ketoasts.com to positively impact my life and to keep us going. Tap the follow button, rate us using the star button, and share this episode with someone who could use some good news. Then, go toast up some bread, because every positive action is worth toasting.
How has nobody ever done a film on this guy? I love wheeling. It's where I figure out life, and I've long accepted that it's where I'm the happiest.